rather deal with a liberal than a
for
conservative.
China, closer to Canada, and that would really put us in a bind.
The conservative that's running is stupidly no friend of mine. I don't know him, but he said negative things. So when he says negative things, I couldn't care less. I think it's easier to deal, actually, with a liberal.
It's true. I'm a strong leader. I'm a tough guy to deal with. I'm firm in my convictions, and I'll always put Canada first.
Really? I don't know. I've seen him for 10 years. They don't look very tough to me. What we need now is seasoned, serious people at the helm of this country. And I think that's what Prime Minister Carney is bringing to that.
U.S. President Donald Trump weighing in on a likely imminent election call in this country, saying he hasn't liked past comments from Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and would rather work with a Liberal. Will those comments matter here in Canada? And if so, in what way? Let's talk about that with our front bench. Sharon Carr is the former Deputy Chief of Staff to former Finance Minister Bill Morneau. She's now a partner at Sovereign Advisory. Jamie Ellerton is a Conservative strategist and the founder and principal of Canaptus. Former interim NDP National Director Carl Bélanger is with us. He's now the president of Traction Strategies. And rounding us out this evening, Hannah Thibodeau is a former news anchor. She's now an executive communications officer at Global Public Affairs. Hi, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Hi. Hannah, I'll start with you. Does this comment, I mean, you know, Pierre Poilievre wanted to respond to this today. You could see the Liberals were definitely downplaying it. Like, does this comment actually make a difference in addressing what appears to be, and certainly public opinion polling would underscore, a vulnerability that has emerged for Pierre Poilievre around Trump?
I think on the margins, yes, because he made a comment quickly after to ensure that he took advantage of this. And he knows he has to, because there is that vulnerability that people think the best person in the polling says that Mark Carney is likely that person. What I find weird, though, is what Donald Trump said. I'd rather deal with a Liberal government. That's not what he felt before under Justin Trudeau. Maybe he didn't know he was a Liberal. I'm not 100% sure, but he was out there trolling former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for a long time. Pierre Poilievre, does see this as an opportunity, though, and he does have to get his voice out there and say that he is strong. He is tough against Donald Trump. And for those that maybe were like, moving over and thinking, I think Mr. Carney's the best person, not Pierre Poilievre, this might bring him back a little bit for those who were just in the middle. But I think a lot of people have made up their minds at this point, and we're not in the election campaign yet. But I just found it fascinating that Donald Trump would even say those things.
Yeah, I mean, the same sentence could apply to so much of the last 6 weeks. Jamie, what's your take on whether or not something like this makes a difference? Is it just at the margins? Is it something that needs to be said, given what the public opinion polling has been like for the Conservatives over the past few weeks? Do you think it makes a difference?
I do think it makes a difference. I think it also complicates everything. I'm perhaps going to be a bit of a bad partisan tonight, but this election is so up for grabs. Canadians are like sick of the political status quo. They don't want like the rehashed political talking points. And I think when you already see Liberals have tried to push that Pierre Poilievre and Donald Trump are one and the same. And now if that clip beyond this one-day news story becomes something that is seen over and over again, gets ad spend put behind it, and it clearly draws a line between Canada's conservatism and the spirit of Canadian conservatives to that, what you see of the excesses of the mega movement and Donald Trump, then I do think it absolutely helps Pierre Poilievre. I think when you look at the reality of what we're facing, though, you have Liberals that have 180'd on a lot of their own policies in recent months, and Conservatives saying, how about you take the people who've been advocating for these things and let us actually take the country to a better place? Every day that Donald Trump is essentially throwing shade at Pierre Poilievre is the day that he gets to stand up and kind of wear the Captain Canada cape the same way Doug Ford did in his campaign, and I think helps Conservative campaign fortunes.
Sharon, Jamie mentioned ads, right? And there have already been some out from the Liberal Party. I can only imagine that they will increase, particularly like they, you know, a number of months ago, they were already drawing those comparisons and they were landing differently than they are right now in a completely different political context with Trump actually at the helm and taking shots at Canada. How much do you anticipate something like this will actually make a dent in what the Liberals have already kind of launched with their ad campaign?
Yeah, definitely. So, like, I adore you, Jamie, but I so disagree. To be honest, I think what everyone needs to remember here is Donald Trump had a significant personal issue with our previous leader, Prime Minister Trudeau. His vitriol, the whole governor commentary, the whole 51st state, very much directed towards his dislike towards him, and also, to a certain extent, his dislike towards Minister Freeland, having his time dealing with them. Now, we've seen a complete shift in tone and tenor, and I know a lot of conservatives are out spinning to say that this video that Donald Trump recorded last night is like the best thing since sliced bread, because now we have Pierre Poilievre saying, I am a tough guy. I'm going to stand up for Canada. That's not what Canadians want right now. Canadians see Mark Carney as somebody who, and sorry, the Prime Minister as somebody who can actually sit down and have a adult conversation and diffuse it. We went from all of this hectic nonsense around annexing Canada. We haven't heard him say much about that last week. We haven't heard him call the Prime Minister governor. So I think the Conservatives can use that in the ads, but people don't see Pierre Poilievre as somebody who can take on someone like Donald Trump. It's going to cause more of a rift. It's going to cause more of this, let's annex them and take them over as a state. I actually think we can take this as a sign of respect coming from President Trump, because he doesn't compliment people very often, and we saw him do that recently with Premier Doug Ford after the Premier pushed back, and we saw how that had led to some more, I would say, constructive conversations and some pauses around tariffs. So I actually think it's weird, it's hilarious. It's also just, what universe do we live in where Donald Trump is saying he'd rather have Liberals? But you know what? If it means we take the temperature down and allow an adult to go to the table, I'm all for it.
Carl, let me ask you then, based on what both Jamie and Sharon just said, is the bigger issue, how Canadians view who will navigate Donald Trump better, or is the vulnerability for the Conservatives in particular any comparisons that are drawn with Trump? Like, which is their bigger issue, I guess, if you take public opinion polling to heart?
Well, I mean, for the Conservatives, they have that anchor around their neck that the Liberals cannot have, despite what Donald Trump said today. Nobody will think that, the views of Donald Trump are aligned with the Carney Liberals or any Liberal, to be honest. Unlike what he said just 2 months ago, when he said, he was looking forward to work with Pierre Poilievre and that their views were more aligned. So that's the anchor around Pierre Poilievre's neck. So I think Poilievre could not have been happier today to hear Donald Trump say that. And if I was mischievous, Vashi, I would say perhaps a conservative strategist might have called a Republican friend to kind of put that bug in Donald Trump's ear. But I'm not mischievous, so I'm not going to suggest that. I'm just going to say that it's quite possible that Donald Trump is upset about things he read from Pierre Poilievre about himself, because that's the way this guy reacts. But for Pierre Poilievre, it's certainly a good day, because it allows him to create that stand up to Donald Trump kind of persona that he failed to establish thus far.
Does it still feel, Hannah, like the Trump factor is the factor?
Oh, yes, 110%. It was interesting. I was talking to people who aren't tied into our world about this comment by Donald Trump, and I'm like, does that kind of, separate Pierre Poilievre from this? And you know what they started quoting were the Liberal ads showing the likenesses between Donald Trump and Pierre Poilievre in those ads. It's like, wow, those really have set in already into people's minds, comparing the two people. They don't want someone angry dealing with Mr. Trump, and sometimes that is what comes across from Mr. Poilievre. The Canada's broken, we're the only ones who can do this, and he has to try to switch that persona now to bring the anxiety levels down of Canadians and show that he would be the one who could diplomatically deal with this person, because we are, and I know we want to diversify where we send our exports and all those things, but in the meantime, we still have to deal with this person south of the border.
Jamie, you would know better than me. I just don't get the sense that, all the sort of in the sort of punditry and media class, the talk of the pivot and everything, I don't get the sense that that's what they feel like they should be doing. Like, I think that they think the persona that they want to project is the one that Pierre Poilievre said in that clip, like, I will stand up essentially against Trump.
Yeah, I think there's a few things going on here, Vashi. One, we know we are in an incredibly short runway that the Conservative Party has to try and define Mark Carney in the eyes of Canadians. rather than listening to Liberals talking about Mark Carney in that more positive framing they're trying to put on him. And so the Conservatives have been put in a bind where they have to take to the airwaves and draw some of the critiques. It's worked. You saw the Liberals have already abandoned the carbon tax as one example in influencing the Liberal race from the outside. The questions of conflict of interest and this notion of a blind trust, but knowing what was in it the day before and all of a sudden he doesn't, those questions continue to dog him, speaks to character and integrity. So you're in this kind of window where they have to be negative to kind of drive up awareness of the fullness picture of Mark Carney. Well, on the other hand, if you go back to what Pierre Poilievre said on his Flag Day speech, we haven't seen much of that now for the past month. And I think if Pierre Poilievre is going to succeed in this campaign, he's going to have to find not a switch track and not a pivot. He's going to have to take his leadership to another level and kind of channel that patriotism, the constructive nation building that he really talked about, how we can use the federal government's tools and resources to truly make the country a better place in a way that's going to resonate beyond the kind of day-to-day political rancor that I think people more associate with him right now. And I think you are going to see more of that in a writ period. And so if he can unlock that, I still think this is very much a change election. Mark Carney sure gets to take the mantle as being a change candidate for part of this because he literally is change and is no longer Justin Trudeau, who was the most reviled politician in the country the day he resigned. But this is still very much up for grabs, and none of this is decided.
30 seconds left. I just want to give Sharon the last word. Go ahead.
Listen, I think we've seen it. Pierre Poilievre and his team are unable to pivot. They want to continuously go at the carbon tax. We saw that earlier this week. He is unable to pivot to somebody other than Justin Trudeau. The biggest gift for him to be measuring the drapes of the Prime Minister's office was Justin Trudeau, and he doesn't have that anymore. So, listen, I'm totally happy if they want to keep going down this path of their messaging because it's not helping them. But if I was advising the Conservatives, I would say you need to pivot and you need to not be the angry guy. You need to come off as a statesman because right now what people want is a statesman dealing with President Trump.